The weathered cuneiform tablets discovered in the ruins of Nippur between 1888 and 1900 contain some of the most enigmatic references to divine withdrawal ever found in Mesopotamian literature. Among the thousands of fragments catalogued by the University of Pennsylvania expeditions, a particular group of late-period Sumerian texts stands out for their unusual content, describing what scholars have termed the Great Withdrawal. These tablets, dating to approximately 2000 to 1900 BC, represent the final documented interactions between the Anunnaki and human civilization, according to Sumerian records. What makes these documents particularly intriguing is their matter-of-fact tone, lacking the typical religious flourishes found in most Sumerian religious texts. The tablets describe not an abandonment, but a carefully orchestrated departure that included the establishment of communication protocols, technological and ritual procedures that would enable continued contact across the vast distances of space and time. The most significant of these tablets, designated as CBS 10673 in the University Museum's collection, contains a detailed account written in archaic Sumerian script that differs markedly from contemporary administrative documents. But hidden within administrative appendices and ceremonial descriptions lies evidence of something far more profound. A sophisticated communication infrastructure designed to maintain connection with departed celestial beings through a combination of advanced technology, astronomical timing, and precisely calibrated ritual procedures. The evidence suggests that the Sumerians not only knew their divine overseers were leaving, they received detailed instructions for maintaining contact in their absence. The sacred precinct at Nippur, traditional seat of Enlil and center of Sumerian religious authority, became the focal point for what tablet CBS 10673 describes as _1_, a comprehensive evaluation of humanity's readiness for independence and the Anunnaki's decision to withdraw direct oversight. Archaeological evidence from Nippur itself supports the narrative found in these tablets. Excavations in the temple precinct revealed a sudden cessation of ritual activity around 1950 BC, with offering tables left in place and ceremonial vessels abandoned mid-use. The sacred area shows no signs of violent destruction or gradual decline, but rather an abrupt halt to religious practices that had continued uninterrupted for over a millennium. The University of Pennsylvania expeditions to Nippur, conducted between 1888 and 1900 under the direction of John Punnett Peters and Hermann Hilprecht, uncovered over 30,000 cuneiform tablets in various states of preservation. Among these, a subset of approximately 200 texts dated to the final decades of direct Anunnaki presence demonstrates remarkable consistency in describing departure preparations and the establishment of post-departure protocols. These administrative documents, written in late Sumerian script with occasional Akkadian glosses, employ the dry bureaucratic language typical of temple record-keeping rather than the elevated religious rhetoric found in mythological compositions. This pragmatic tone suggests the texts document actual events and procedures rather than religious allegory. Tablet CBS 10673 itself measures approximately 15 centimeters by 10 centimeters. Inscribed on both obverse and reverse surfaces with over 300 lines of densely packed cuneiform script. The physical condition of the tablet indicates it was stored in protected conditions and handled frequently, suggesting it served as a reference document for ongoing procedures rather than an archival record. Translation work by Samuel Noah Kramer in the 1950s revealed the tablet's extraordinary content, though many of its technical passages remained obscure until more recent interdisciplinary analysis, incorporating astronomical and engineering expertise provided context for understanding its specialized terminology. The tablet describes a formal assembly convened at Nippur's Akur temple complex during what it specifies as _2_ an astronomical reference that computer modeling places at approximately 1953 BC. The assembly included representatives from all major Anunnaki administrative centers, Babylon, Uruk, Eridu, Lagash, and Sippar, suggesting a coordinated decision affecting the entire civilization rather than a regional administrative adjustment. The text indicates this gathering lasted 12 days, during which detailed presentations were made regarding human developmental progress, resource allocation concerns, and compliance with predetermined mission parameters. Most significantly for understanding post-departure communication, the tablet's final sections outline specific protocols for maintaining contact after physical withdrawal. These passages describe the designation of 7 primary communication centers, each equipped with what the text calls devices of distance speaking and staffed by hereditary priesthoods trained in their operation. The document specifies that these centers would conduct coordinated transmission attempts during astronomically determined windows when the pathways of heaven align for the carrying of words across the void. The precision of these instructions, including equipment calibration procedures and transmission timing calculations, indicates this represented a carefully planned technological infrastructure rather than symbolic religious ritual. Excavations at Nippur's Echo Complex, particularly the work conducted by Donald McCown between 1952 and 1963, revealed physical evidence consistent with these textual accounts. Beneath the main temple platform, archaeologists uncovered a series of underground chambers that extended approximately 20 meters below the surface, far deeper than necessary for conventional storage or burial purposes. These chambers showed evidence of sophisticated environmental control systems, including ventilation shafts that maintained constant air circulation and drainage channels that protected the spaces from groundwater infiltration, despite their depth below the water table. The construction techniques observed in these underground chambers exceeded standard Mesopotamian building practices in several notable aspects. The walls incorporated fired brick sealed with bitumen compounds that chemical analysis revealed contained additives, including rare mineral salts and organic resins, not found in normal Mesopotamian construction materials. These additives created waterproof barriers with antimicrobial properties that protected stored materials from decay across millennia. The chamber ceilings utilized corbelling techniques combined with metallic reinforcement elements that distributed weight loads more effectively than conventional masonry methods. Most intriguingly, the chambers included carved stone platforms with precise geometric markings and mounting points that appeared designed to hold sophisticated equipment. Tablet VAT 7851, housed in the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin, describes the operational procedures for ziggurat observatories during what it terms _5_. The document details complex coordination between multiple observation sites that tracked different aspects of the departure process, and crucially, the establishment of communication systems that would remain operational after the physical departure. Observatory teams at Babylon monitored what the text calls _6_, while installations at Ur tracked _7_ and facilities at Nippur maintained what the tablet describes as _8_. This tablet, measuring approximately 20 centimeters by 13 centimeters, was acquired by the Berlin Museum in 1914 from the antiquities market. Its original excavation context unfortunately unrecorded. Despite this provenance limitation, paleographic analysis by Wolfram von Soden firmly established its composition date to the late Ur-III period, approximately 2100 to 2000 BC. The tablet's content demonstrates technical sophistication that sets it apart from contemporary religious or administrative texts, employing specialized terminology for astronomical observations and equipment operations that appears nowhere else in the known corpus of Mesopotamian literature. The operational protocols described in VAT 7851 required coordination across vast geographical distances, with observation sites separated by hundreds of kilometers maintaining synchronized activities according to precisely calculated timing sequences. The text indicates that primary coordination occurred through a network of signal stations that relayed information between major centers, using methods the document terms fire speech and mirror words. These communication methods, while superficially similar to known ancient signaling techniques using torches and polished metal reflectors, are described with technical specifications that suggest more sophisticated applications than simple visual messaging systems. The tablet provides detailed instructions for observatory operations during what it identifies as transmission windows, specific periods when astronomical conditions created optimal circumstances for communication attempts. These windows were calculated based on multiple celestial factors, including planetary positions, lunar phases, solar activity indicators, and stellar configurations that the text describes with mathematical precision. The calculations required understanding of orbital mechanics and celestial dynamics that conventional chronology places as discoveries of Renaissance and Enlightenment astronomy, yet the tablet presents them as established operational parameters known to Mesopotamian priest astronomers of the 3rd millennium BC. Perhaps most significantly, VAT 7851 describes the physical equipment required for these communication operations with specificity that enables technical reconstruction. The text mentions stones of speaking that must be tuned to the voices of the distant ones, bronze mirrors that capture and send the light of stars, and chambers of echoing where the words of men become the words of gods. These descriptions, while clothed in religious language, contain technical specifications including precise measurements, material requirements, and assembly instructions that suggest genuine technological devices rather than purely ceremonial objects. Archaeological investigation of Babylonian ziggurat complexes has revealed chambers that match these textual descriptions with remarkable accuracy. Excavations conducted by Robert Coldwell between 1899 and 1917 at the Anunnaki ziggurat in Babylon uncovered rooms in the upper levels that contained unusual architectural features, including parabolic ceiling shapes that would create acoustic focusing effects, niches with precise geometric arrangements that could hold reflective surfaces or crystalline objects, and floor patterns with metallic inlays that formed complex geometric designs. While Coldwell interpreted these features as purely decorative or ceremonial, modern acoustic and electromagnetic analysis reveals they would function effectively as signal amplification and transmission systems. The astronomical knowledge required for maintaining contact with departed Anunnaki extended far beyond simple stellar observation to encompass sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics, orbital dynamics, and electromagnetic propagation through interplanetary space. Babylonian mathematical texts from the Seleucid period preserve calculation methods that demonstrate this advanced knowledge, including techniques for determining precise communication windows when Earth's position relative to the Anunnaki's destination created optimal transmission conditions. These calculations required understanding of concepts that wouldn't be formally recognized until the development of modern astrophysics. The astronomical tablets from the Library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh, excavated by Austin Henry Layard between 1845 and 1851, include mathematical texts that demonstrate computational sophistication far exceeding what conventional histories attribute to ancient Mesopotamian astronomy. Tablet K 3458. Now in the British Museum collection, contains calculations for determining what it calls _17 the mathematical procedures described in this text account for Earth's orbital position, planetary alignments that could interfere with or enhance signal propagation, solar activity cycles that affect atmospheric and electromagnetic conditions, and even the relative motion of the solar system through surrounding space. The precision of these calculations becomes apparent when examined using modern astronomical software. The tablet specifies that optimal communication windows occur when specific planetary configurations align with particular stellar coordinates that the text identifies using traditional Mesopotamian constellation names. Computer modelling of these configurations reveals they create gravitational and electromagnetic conditions that modern space communications would recognise as favourable for long-distance signal transmission. The ancient astronomers who developed these calculations understood principles of orbital resonance, gravitational field interactions, and electromagnetic propagation that would not be formally articulated until the 20th century. One particularly sophisticated calculation method preserved in these texts involves what modern mathematics would recognise as iterative approximation techniques for solving complex equations that have no simple algebraic solutions. The Babylonian astronomers developed algorithms that progressively refined initial estimates through repeated calculations, eventually achieving accuracy levels that approach the limits of observational precision. These iterative methods appear in calculations for planetary positions, eclipse predictions, and most significantly for the communication window calculations, where they enable determination of optimal transmission timing despite the complexity of multiple interacting celestial factors. The mathematical tools employed in these calculations included trigonometric functions that weren't officially developed until Hellenistic Greek mathematics, numerical techniques that anticipated calculus concepts by millennia, and coordinate transformation methods that enabled conversion between different reference frames for astronomical observations. Tablet BM 34580, analysed by Otto Neugebauer in the 1950s, contains a table of what modern mathematicians recognise as proto-trigonometric values used for converting between different angular measurement systems and calculating celestial positions from multiple observation points. The sophistication of these mathematical techniques indicates that Babylonian astronomers possessed theoretical knowledge that far exceeded practical observational requirements for calendar keeping or astrological prediction. The communication window calculation specifically identified periods when Earth's position in its orbit, combined with favourable planetary alignments and solar activity conditions, created what the texts describe as clear pathways through the heavenly waters. This poetic language appears to reference the solar wind and interplanetary medium through which electromagnetic signals would propagate, demonstrating awareness of the physical environment of space that contradicts conventional assumptions about ancient cosmological understanding. The texts indicate that these optimal windows occurred with varying frequency depending on the intended destination of communications, with some distant stations requiring rare alignments that occurred only at intervals of decades or centuries. The great ziggurats of Mesopotamia functioned as far more than religious monuments or administrative centres. They constituted sophisticated communication installations designed to transmit and receive signals across interplanetary or even interstellar distances. The architectural precision of these structures, their astronomical alignments, and their incorporation of specific materials and geometric relationships all contributed to their function as transmission and reception facilities. Archaeological investigation reveals technological features that conventional interpretations of ancient Mesopotamian capabilities cannot adequately explain. The ziggurat of Ur, constructed during the reign of Ur-Nammu around 2100 BC, demonstrates architectural precision that exceeds functional requirements for a purely ceremonial or administrative structure. Modern surveying of the structure, conducted by the British Museum expedition, led by Leonard Woolley between 1922 and 1934, revealed that the massive base platform measures approximately 62 metres by 43 metres, with corner orientations that deviate less than 1 degree from true cardinal directions. This level of precision required sophisticated surveying techniques and astronomical observations for orientation determination, suggesting the structure's alignment served functional purposes beyond symbolic representation of cosmic order. The ziggurat's construction incorporated materials selected for properties that extend beyond structural requirements. The core structure consists of mud brick, standard for Mesopotamian architecture, but the facing employed fired brick set in bitumen mortar that created a weatherproof exterior. Chemical analysis of this bitumen conducted by researchers at the British Museum's conservation laboratories revealed it contained additives including metallic salts and crystalline minerals that significantly enhanced its electrical conductivity properties. While conventional interpretation attributes these additives to waterproofing enhancement, their effect on electromagnetic properties suggests alternative functional considerations. The internal structure of Mesopotamian ziggurats incorporated features that served no obvious structural or ceremonial purpose, but demonstrate sophisticated engineering for acoustic and electromagnetic functions. The Anu ziggurat at Uruk, dating to approximately 3200 BC, contains internal chambers discovered during German excavations between 1928 and 1939 that exhibit parabolic ceiling shapes creating precise acoustic focusing effects. Sound tests conducted in these chambers by researchers from the German Archaeological Institute demonstrated that specific vocal frequencies were amplified by factors of 10 or more, while other frequencies were dampened, creating selective frequency response that would be ideal for signal transmission and reception. The summit platforms of ziggurats consistently show evidence of having held sophisticated equipment whose function remains enigmatic to conventional archaeology. Excavations at the summit level of multiple ziggurats have revealed foundation stones with carved channels and mounting points arranged in precise geometric patterns that appear designed to hold and orient equipment toward specific celestial coordinates. Bronze fittings still present in some of these mounting points show wear patterns, indicating they held objects that were regularly adjusted and realigned, suggesting operational equipment rather than static decorative or ceremonial objects. The geometric proportions governing ziggurat construction encode mathematical relationships that appear throughout ancient sacred architecture, but whose significance extends beyond aesthetic considerations to functional electromagnetic properties. The step pyramid form creates a series of horizontal surfaces at different elevations that could function as phased array antenna elements if constructed with appropriate materials and spacing. The specific ratios between level heights, platform dimensions, and overall structure proportions correspond to harmonic relationships that would optimize electromagnetic resonance at specific wavelengths. While ancient Mesopotamian texts do not explicitly describe these electromagnetic functions, the mathematical precision of the proportions argues against attributing them to purely aesthetic choices or accidental results of construction methods. References throughout Mesopotamian texts to quote 20 and quote 21 describe technological artifacts that modern archaeology has repeatedly discovered but struggled to explain. These crystalline devices found in sealed temple chambers at Nippur, Babylon, and other major sites demonstrate construction techniques and material compositions that differ significantly from known Mesopotamian craftsmanship. Chemical analysis reveals they incorporate rare earth elements in precise ratios, optimized for electromagnetic conductivity and resonance characteristics. The most extensively studied examples of these crystalline devices come from excavations at Nippur, conducted by the University of Pennsylvania between 1888 and 1900. In sealed chambers. Beneath the Eker temple complex, archaeologists discovered approximately 24 objects that initial reports classified as ceremonial items or decorative vessels, but whose physical properties indicate more sophisticated functions. These objects, designated in museum records as cult vessels or votive offerings, range from 5 to 30 centimeters in length and exhibit geometric forms including hexagonal prisms, truncated pyramids, and compound shapes that combine multiple geometric elements. Detailed analysis of these artifacts conducted using modern materials, science techniques at the University of Pennsylvania Museum's conservation laboratories revealed their construction involved sophisticated crystal growing and shaping processes. The objects consist of high-purity silicon dioxide crystals, similar to natural quartz, but with internal structures that indicate controlled growth conditions rather than natural geological formation. X-ray diffraction studies show these crystals possess highly ordered molecular arrangements with fewer defects than naturally occurring quartz, suggesting they were produced using techniques that carefully controlled temperature, pressure, and chemical environment during crystal formation. The most remarkable feature of these crystalline devices becomes apparent through spectroscopic analysis that reveals their chemical composition includes trace elements not found in natural Mesopotamian mineral deposits. The crystals contain precisely controlled concentrations of elements including neodymium, praseodymium, and erbium, rare earth elements that would not be isolated and identified until the 19th century. These elements are present in ratios that modern solid-state physics recognizes as optimal for creating materials with specific electromagnetic properties, including piezoelectric effects, laser gain media characteristics, and frequency-selective absorption and emission spectra. The physical form of these crystalline devices shows evidence of precision shaping that required tools and techniques exceeding documented ancient Mesopotamian capabilities. The surfaces exhibit optical polish quality with roughness measurements below 1 micrometer, comparable to modern precision optical components. The geometric forms incorporate angles and proportions measured with sub-degree precision, and complex shapes involving multiple intersecting planes are executed with alignment accuracies requiring sophisticated measurement and fabrication capabilities. Several specimens show evidence of having been ground and polished to create specific curved surfaces that would function as lenses or focusing elements for optical or electromagnetic signals. Most intriguingly, several of the crystalline devices from Nippur show evidence of having incorporated metallic components that have since corroded away, leaving precise cavities and mounting points within the crystal structures. These cavities follow patterns that suggest the devices were designed to hold metallic elements in specific geometric relationships to the crystalline substrates, creating composite structures that would combine the electromagnetic properties of both materials. Traces of corrosion products found in these cavities indicate the metallic components were composed of copper-gold-silver alloys, with proportions that would optimize electrical conductivity while minimizing oxidation, metallurgical knowledge that aligns with advanced understanding preserved in other Mesopotamian technological artifacts. The internal architecture of Mesopotamian temple complexes incorporated sophisticated acoustic engineering that created resonance chambers tuned to specific frequencies. The Marduk temple at Babylon included acoustic features that amplified particular vocal frequencies while dampening others, creating communication conditions that enhance signal clarity and transmission power. Recent acoustic analysis of surviving ziggurat chambers has revealed they were designed according to principles of harmonic resonance and standing wave amplification that wouldn't be formally understood until the development of modern acoustics. The Asagila temple complex dedicated to Marduk at Babylon, extensively excavated by Robert Coldaway between 1899 and 1917, contained underground chambers whose architectural features demonstrate clear acoustic design intentions. These chambers, carved from bedrock and lined with precisely fitted stone blocks, incorporate curved ceiling surfaces, strategically positioned wall niches, and floor patterns that create complex acoustic environments. Modern acoustic analysis conducted by researchers from the Technical University of Berlin using three-dimensional laser scanning and acoustic modeling software revealed these chambers function as highly effective resonance cavities with precisely defined frequency response characteristics. The acoustic properties of these Babylonian chambers demonstrate selective amplification of frequencies in the range of 80 to 120 Hz, a range that encompasses fundamental frequencies of human vocal production and corresponds to wavelengths that would propagate efficiently through architectural structures. Sound pressure measurements taken within reconstructed chamber geometries show amplification factors exceeding 20 decibels at these optimal frequencies, while frequencies outside this range experience attenuation. This selective frequency response creates what modern acoustic engineering would recognize as a bandpass filter that enhances specific signal content while suppressing noise and interference. The ceiling geometry of these chambers incorporates parabolic and elliptical curves that focus sound energy towards specific locations within the rooms. Analysis of the mathematical relationships governing these curves reveals they correspond to geometric principles that maximize acoustic focusing efficiency. The chambers include paired locations positioned at the focal points of elliptical reflectors, creating acoustic links where sound produced at one focus point is concentrated at the corresponding focus point with minimal loss or distortion. These acoustic channels would enable low-volume communication across chamber distances, or alternatively, could concentrate vocal energy for transmission beyond the chamber through associated structural elements. Tablet VAT 18934 describes operational procedures for what it terms quote, _22, that match precisely the architectural features found in the Babylonian excavations. The text specifies that these chambers must be quote, _23, through adjustment of chamber dimensions and surface treatments that alter acoustic properties. The document provides measurement specifications in ancient Mesopotamian units that convert to dimensions matching the actual chamber geometries, indicating the text describes real facilities rather than mythological constructs. Most significantly, the tablet indicates these acoustic chambers connected to quote, _24 that carried amplified sound energy to transmission points at ziggurat summits. Archaeological evidence reveals that Mesopotamian temples incorporated extensive systems of hollow chambers and passages within their massive brick structures that would function as acoustic waveguides for sound transmission. The Anu ziggurat at Uruk contains internal passages approximately 1 meter square in cross-section that ascend through the structure's core from ground level to the summit platform. These passages, discovered during German excavations in the 1930s, were initially interpreted as construction features or ventilation shafts, but their precise geometric alignment and carefully finished interior surfaces suggest more deliberate acoustic functions. The passage dimensions correspond to wavelengths of sound in the frequency ranges that the temple's resonance chambers amplify. Indicating these passages could efficiently transmit acoustic energy from lower chambers to summit installations. The summit platforms of major ziggurats show evidence of having held equipment that could convert acoustic energy into other forms for long-distance transmission. Foundation stones at these locations contain carved channels and mounting points arranged in patterns that suggest they held arrays of objects positioned to receive focused acoustic energy from the internal passage systems. Chemical analysis of residues in these mounting points indicates they held metallic objects, possibly bronze or copper alloy vessels or diaphragms that would vibrate in response to acoustic energy. These vibrating metallic elements could function as transducers, converting acoustic energy into electromagnetic radiation through piezoelectric effects or mechanical disruption of electromagnetic fields. The acoustic design principles evident in Mesopotamian temple architecture appear in other ancient structures worldwide, suggesting transmission of technological knowledge or derivation from common sources. The subterranean chambers at the Hypogeum of Halsaflieni in Malta, dating to approximately 3000 BC, demonstrate acoustic properties remarkably similar to the Babylonian resonance chambers, including selective frequency amplification and focusing geometries. The oracle chamber at Delphi in Greece exhibits acoustic characteristics that would enhance specific vocal frequencies and create impressive acoustic effects. The acoustic properties of chambers within Egyptian pyramids, particularly the Grand Gallery and King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid, show evidence of deliberate acoustic design incorporating resonance and focusing principles. Communication with departed Anunnaki required precise astronomical timing that coordinated Earth's position, planetary alignments, solar activity cycles, and stellar configurations to create optimal transmission conditions. Temple calendars throughout Mesopotamia incorporated these communication windows into religious festival schedules, disguising technological procedures as ceremonial observances. The mathematical precision of these timing calculations demonstrates understanding of celestial mechanics that exceeded documented Mesopotamian astronomical capabilities by substantial margins. The Mesopotamian sacred calendar system, preserved in administrative texts from temples throughout the region, incorporated multiple overlapping cycles that tracked lunar phases, solar position, planetary movements, and stellar configurations with mathematical precision. The primary calendar followed a lunar-solar structure with months beginning at lunar crescent visibility and years aligned to solar seasons through intercalation of additional months according to complex calculation schemes. However, embedded within this practical calendar system were additional computational layers that tracked astronomical phenomena relevant to communication timing but unnecessary for agricultural or administrative purposes. Tablet BM 32167, part of the astronomical compendium known as MUL.APIN, contains calculation procedures for determining what the text calls _25_ specific dates when astronomical conditions created favourable circumstances for divine communication. These calculations incorporate factors including lunar phase, solar position within zodiacal constellations, planetary positions relative to specific stellar coordinates, and what the text describes as, quote, 26, an apparent reference to solar activity levels that affect electromagnetic propagation conditions. The computational procedures account for the varying periodicities of these different astronomical cycles, using mathematical techniques that achieve prediction accuracy approaching modern ephemeris calculations. The timing calculations preserved in these texts demonstrate understanding of astronomical cycles extending far beyond the obvious periodicities of lunar months and solar years. The tablets describe planetary synodic periods, the intervals between successive similar configurations of planets relative to Earth and Sun, with numerical values that match modern astronomical measurements to remarkable precision. Venus' synodic period is given as 584 days, compared to the modern value of 583.92 days. Mars' synodic period is recorded as 780 days versus the modern 779.94 days. These accurate values enable prediction of planetary positions years or decades in advance, facilitating long-term planning of communication attempts. The communication timing calculations incorporated understanding of longer astronomical cycles that required centuries of systematic observation to detect and quantify. The texts reference a cycle of 54 years during which eclipse patterns repeat with similar characteristics, what modern astronomy recognizes as the exoligmos cycle, comprising 3 Saros periods. References to a cycle of 19 years that synchronizes lunar and solar calendars describe what Greek astronomy later termed the Metonic cycle. Most remarkably, the texts describe a cycle of 216 years involving conjunctions of Jupiter and Saturn that creates periodic configurations favorable for _27. The temple festival calendar disguise these astronomical timing requirements within religious observances that appeared to outside observers as normal ceremonial activities. The Akitu festival, Mesopotamia's most important annual celebration, occurred during the spring equinox period and lasted 12 days, a duration the astronomical texts indicate corresponded to an optimal communication window when multiple favourable celestial conditions coincided. The festival's ritual procedures included nighttime observances requiring priests to ascend ziggurat summits for astronomical observations and vocal rituals that the texts describe as _28_. These activities concealed technological communication attempts within conventional religious frameworks. Administrative records from the Babylon Esagila temple preserve detailed schedules for festival observances that reveal the astronomical precision underlying their timing. Tablet VAT 472-45, dating to the Neo-Babylonian period, specifies that particular rituals must occur, quote, 29, quote, or quote, 30, quote, or during other precisely defined astronomical conditions. The text includes backup dates for rituals if cloud cover prevents astronomical observations, indicating the importance of executing procedures during exact celestial configurations rather than on fixed calendar dates. The priest responsible for calculating festival timing and conducting astronomical observations received specialized training documented in educational texts from scribal schools. These texts describe curriculum including advanced mathematical techniques for astronomical calculation, practical instruction in using observational instruments, and knowledge of stellar positions and planetary movements accumulated through centuries of systematic observation. The training required students to master calculation methods for predicting eclipses, planetary positions, stellar rising and setting times, and the complex timing of communication windows when multiple astronomical factors aligned favourably. The operation of communication systems required extensive technical training that was preserved through hereditary priesthoods specifically selected for their genetic predisposition and demonstrated capabilities. Tablet K9876 describes the curriculum for communication priests at Babylon, which included instruction in astronomical calculation, acoustic engineering, crystalline device operation, and electromagnetic principles that modern physics would not formally recognize for millennia. These specialists underwent decades of training before being granted access to communication equipment. Tablet K9876, discovered in the library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh during Austin, Henry Layard's excavations between 1845 and 1851, preserves what appears to be an administrative document outlining educational requirements and curriculum structure for temple personnel designated as priests of the distant speaking. The text, written in Neo-Assyrian script but clearly copying much older Babylonian sources, specifies that candidates for this specialized priesthood must come from established priestly families with documented lineages extending back multiple generations. This hereditary requirement suggests recognition that effective communication system operation required innate capabilities that concentrated within specific bloodlines, capabilities modern genetics might interpret as enhanced cognitive processing, unusual sensory sensitivities, or other neurological characteristics with genetic components. The curriculum described in Tablet K9876 began with foundational education in mathematical techniques and astronomical observation that occupied students' first decade of training. Initiates learned computational methods including sexagesimal arithmetic, algebraic problem-solving, geometric principles, and the mathematical tools necessary for astronomical calculations. The text indicates students must achieve proficiency in calculating planetary positions, predicting eclipses, determining optimal calendar intercalations, and performing complex conversions between different measurement systems. Only after demonstrating mastery of these fundamental skills could students progress to more specialized training in communication technologies. The second phase of training, occupying approximately another decade according to the curriculum outline, focused on what the text terms _32 students learn to identify, select, and prepare crystalline materials for communication applications, studying the properties of different mineral varieties and the techniques for shaping and treating them to optimize their functional characteristics. The training included instruction in acoustic principles, teaching students to recognize and manipulate sound properties including frequency, resonance, and amplification. The text describes practical exercises where students learn to quote 33 by adjusting architectural features and material treatments to achieve desired acoustic effects. The curriculum's most advanced phase involved what tablet K9876 describes as mysteries of the forces that move through the void, knowledge that appears to correspond to electromagnetic principles not formally articulated until the 19th and 20th centuries. The text indicates students learn to perceive and manipulate what it terms the invisible currents that flow through space and matter, describing practical exercises involving interactions between metallic objects, crystalline structures, and acoustic vibrations. While the ancient terminology differs from modern physics vocabulary, the described phenomena correspond remarkably to electromagnetic induction, piezoelectric effects, and the interaction between acoustic energy and electromagnetic fields. The training program included extensive memorization requirements that ensured critical knowledge would survive even if written records were lost. Students memorized astronomical tables containing positions of stars and planets, mathematical constants and formulas, equipment calibration procedures, and operational protocols for communication attempts. The text emphasizes that this oral transmission of knowledge through memorization served as backup preservation, ensuring continuity across potential political disruptions or physical destruction of temple archives. The memorization curriculum encompassed what the tablet estimates as approximately 12,000 individual data points and procedural specifications, a cognitive achievement demonstrating the extraordinary mental capabilities developed through the training program. Beyond technical knowledge, the curriculum emphasized what the text describes as disciplines of the mind and breath that appear to correspond to meditation techniques, controlled breathing practices, and mental focus exercises. These practices served both practical and spiritual functions, enhancing students' ability to maintain concentration during extended observation sessions and communication attempts, while also developing the mental states that the text indicates were necessary for effective operation of communication systems. The document suggests that certain mental conditions or consciousness states enhanced communication effectiveness, indicating the technology involved psychic or consciousness-based components alongside purely physical electromagnetic principles. The final stage of training involved apprenticeship under experienced communication priests who supervised students' first attempts to operate actual communication equipment. This practical phase required students to demonstrate proficiency in all technical procedures, including equipment preparation, astronomical timing calculation, transmission protocol execution, and signal reception techniques. Only after successfully completing multiple supervised communication attempts and receiving endorsement from senior priests were students granted independent authorization to conduct communication procedures. The tablet indicates this complete training program typically required 30 to 40 years from initial enrollment to full qualification, ensuring that communication priests possessed both theoretical knowledge and extensive practical experience. Administrative records from Babylon dating to the immediate post-departure period describe the first systematic attempts to establish contact with the Anunnaki using the communication protocols they had established. These texts provide detailed accounts of transmission procedures, equipment settings, astronomical conditions, and the results of communication attempts. Tablet BN 45789 documents a successful contact event that occurred during a specific planetary alignment, describing reception of a response signal that confirmed the communication systems were functioning as designed. Tablet BM 45789, housed in the British Museum's cuneiform collection, dates to approximately 1900 BC based on paleographic analysis and historical context references within the text. The tablet measures approximately 18 centimeters by 12 centimeters and contains over 200 lines of densely inscribed text documenting communication attempts conducted from the Asakala temple at Babylon during the first years following the Anunnaki departure. The text employs technical terminology and procedural language similar to modern laboratory notebooks or engineering logs, recording systematic observations and measurements with remarkable precision and objectivity. The tablet begins by establishing the astronomical context for the communication attempt, specifying the date according to multiple calendar systems and describing celestial conditions in detail. The text records that the attempt occurred _37 placing it approximately 3 years after the departure event documented in other texts. The astronomical description indicates Mercury and Venus appeared together in the western evening sky. Mars stood near opposition in eastern sky. Jupiter occupied a position described as _38, and the Moon approached new phase. Computer modelling of planetary positions for the early 2nd millennium BC identifies only a narrow range of dates matching these conditions. Confirming the text describes actual astronomical observations rather than fictional or symbolic content. The procedural section of tablet BM45789 provides step-by-step documentation of equipment preparation and transmission protocol execution. The text describes positioning of _39 in prescribed geometric arrangement at the summit of the Asagala ziggurat, with precise specifications for their orientation towards stellar coordinates. The stones required _40 involving acoustic stimulation at specific frequencies that the text indicates were determined through calculation based on the intended destination of the communication. Bronze vessels containing _41_ were positioned adjacent to the crystalline devices, apparently serving as electromagnetic coupling elements that enhance transmission efficiency. The transmission procedure involved coordinated vocal rituals performed by 7 priests positioned at the crystalline device locations, while astronomical conditions reached their optimal configuration. The text describes the priests producing _42 at precise frequencies maintained for extended durations, with the vocal energy directed through the crystalline devices and acoustic systems designed to convert and amplify the signals. The procedure required maintaining these transmission conditions for what the tablet describes as _43 approximately 20 to 30 minutes using normal breathing rates, during which the astronomical configuration remained favourable for communication. Most significantly, tablet BM45789 documents reception of a response signal that the priests interpreted as confirming successful contact with departed Anunnaki. The text describes that after _44 following completion of the transmission procedure, _45, the received signal manifested as acoustic vibrations in the crystalline devices that the priest described as resembling human speech, but with tonal qualities distinctly different from normal vocal production. The text indicates the signal lasted approximately _46_ and conveyed what the priests understood as acknowledgement of the transmission and confirmation that the communication systems were functioning properly. The tablet preserves the content of this received message, using phonetic transcription that attempts to capture the acoustic characteristics of the signal. The transcribed sequence includes combinations of vowel sounds and tonal patterns that don't correspond to normal Sumerian or Akkadian linguistic structures, suggesting the message employed an artificial communication protocol designed for reliable transmission rather than natural language. The priest's interpretation of this acoustic sequence indicated it conveyed reassurance regarding continued Anunnaki oversight despite physical absence, instructions for maintaining communication equipment and timing future contact attempts, an acknowledgement that humanity had successfully demonstrated capability for independent civilization management. The content of communications with departed Anunnaki was encoded using sophisticated symbolic systems that concealed sensitive information within apparently religious or ceremonial texts. This encryption served multiple purposes: protecting advanced knowledge from unauthorized access, preserving information across potential civilizational disruptions, and enabling gradual revelation of content as humanity's understanding developed. Analysis of Mesopotamian religious texts using modern cryptographic techniques reveals embedded layers of technical specifications, astronomical data, and procedural instructions. The practice of embedding technical information within religious narratives appears systematically throughout Mesopotamian cuneiform literature, suggesting deliberate encryption strategies rather than accidental obscuration through mythological language. The Enuma Elish creation epic, traditionally interpreted as purely mythological cosmogony, contains numerical sequences and geometric descriptions that modern analysis reveals encode sophisticated astronomical data. The text description of Marduk creating the cosmos from Tiamat's divided body employs specific measurements and proportional relationships that correspond to actual celestial parameters, including planetary orbital ratios, lunar cycle periods, and stellar coordinate systems. Computational analysis of Enuma Elish by researchers at the University of California, Berkeley, using cryptographic pattern recognition algorithms, identified embedded numerical sequences that function as lookup indices for astronomical tables, preserved in separate mathematical texts. The epic's repeated use of numbers 7, 12, 50, and 3600 appears arbitrary in mythological context, but gains significance when recognized as reference keys, directing readers to specific entries in astronomical compendia. This encoding method allowed technical astronomical data to be preserved within widely copied religious texts, while restricting access to readers who possessed the specialized knowledge necessary for decryption. The symbolic encryption extended beyond simple numerical encoding to incorporate layered meanings where surface religious narratives concealed technical procedures accessible only to initiated readers. Tablet VAT9825, containing ritual instructions for temple ceremonies, provides detailed descriptions of ceremonial actions that superficially appear as religious worship, but contain embedded operational procedures for communication equipment. The text's instructions for positioning ceremonial objects, performing vocal rituals, and timing activities according to celestial observations match precisely the communication protocols documented in explicitly technical texts, suggesting the ritual descriptions function as encrypted operational manuals disguised within religious frameworks. The encryption methods employed multiple encoding layers that provided progressive revelation of content based on readers' level of knowledge and technical understanding. Surface layer meanings accessible to general readers presented mythological narratives and religious teachings that served legitimate ceremonial and cultural functions. Intermediate layers revealed to initiated temple personnel contained historical information about Anunnaki activities and general technological principles. Deepest layers accessible only to fully trained communication priests preserved precise technical specifications and operational procedures necessary for equipment operation and system maintenance. Linguistic analysis reveals that Mesopotamian technical text employed specialized terminology that functioned as technical jargon, concealing precise meanings within apparently common vocabulary. Words that in normal contexts meant ordinary objects or actions acquired specific technical meanings in communication-related texts. The term commonly translated as, quote, 47 could refer to crystalline communication devices when used in appropriate contexts. Quote, 48 designated electrically conductive solutions with specific chemical compositions. Quote 49 described electromagnetic signal transmission procedures. This semantic encoding allowed technical discussions to occur in texts that appeared to outsiders as conventional religious content, the mathematical content embedded within. Mesopotamian astronomical texts employed notation systems that compressed large amounts of numerical data into compact representations requiring specialized knowledge for interpretation. Sexagesimal place value notation enabled representation of precise numerical values using fewer cuneiform signs than decimal equivalents would require, but also created ambiguity regarding magnitude that could only be resolved through contextual knowledge. Astronomical tables employed abbreviation conventions and standardized formatting that functioned as data compression algorithms, storing extensive ephemeris information in formats accessible only to trained astronomers who understood the expansion procedures. The preservation strategy inherent in this encryption approach ensured that even if civilizational collapse destroyed institutional knowledge systems and eliminated trained specialists, the encrypted technical information would survive in widely distributed copies of religious and astronomical texts. Future civilizations achieving sufficient technological sophistication would recognize the embedded technical content and gain access to preserved knowledge. This long-term preservation design anticipated the cyclical pattern of civilizational rise and fall documented in Mesopotamian historical traditions, ensuring that essential knowledge would survive catastrophic disruptions and remain available for eventual rediscovery. Effective communication with departed Anunnaki required coordination between multiple temple sites that functioned as an integrated transmission and reception network. Administrative tablets describe messenger systems, signal protocols, and conference procedures that connected communication centers throughout Mesopotamia and surrounding regions. This network distributed transmission and reception capabilities across geographical distances, ensuring system redundancy and enabling triangulation of incoming signals. The coordination required suggests communication technologies more advanced than the conventional methods documented in Mesopotamian texts. Tablet VAT-12-348, dating to the Ur-3rd period around 2100 BC, preserves administrative records documenting the operational structure of what it terms _50_. The text identifies 7 primary communication centers located at Babylon, Nippur, Uruk, Ur, Eridu, Sippar, and Larsa, with each site designated responsibility for monitoring specific celestial coordinates, corresponding to different Anunnaki destinations. The document specifies that these centers maintained continuous coordination, with daily exchange of observational data, equipment status reports, and scheduling information for planned communication attempts. The administrative complexity of this coordination network rivaled that of contemporary military or commercial logistics systems, indicating substantial institutional investment in maintaining communication capabilities. The coordination protocols described in administrative text required real-time information sharing across distances of up to 300 kilometers between the most separated sites. Tablet CBS 18973 describes a messenger system employing dedicated runners who travel between sites carrying encoded messages written on small clay tablets or sealed papyrus documents. The text indicates that critical communications regarding astronomical observations or equipment malfunctions received highest priority routing, with messengers traveling day and night to minimize information transmission delays. However, the coordination timing requirements documented in these texts suggest that conventional messenger systems alone could not provide the rapid information exchange necessary for effective network operation. References to _51 and _52 in multiple administrative documents describe communication methods that enabled faster information transfer than physical messenger transport. Tablet BM 67892 contains instructions for operating what it describes as relay. Stations positioned at elevated locations between major sites, where personnel maintained watch for light signals transmitted from adjacent stations. The text provides detailed specifications for signal coding systems using combinations of light flashes that could convey standardized messages, including astronomical observations, timing notifications, and equipment status updates. The sophistication of these optical telegraph systems exceeded conventional historical assumptions about ancient Mesopotamian signaling capabilities, incorporating error detection schemes and message authentication protocols that ensured reliable communication. The network coordination extended beyond simple information exchange to include synchronized transmission procedures that required multiple sites to conduct simultaneous communication attempts. Tablet K8765 describes protocols for coordinated transmissions, where communication centers activated their equipment at precisely calculated astronomical moments, creating what the text terms _53_ through combined signal power from multiple transmission points. This coordinated transmission strategy corresponds to what modern telecommunications would recognize as spatial diversity techniques that enhance signal strength and reliability by combining outputs from geographically distributed transmitters. The astronomical timing precision required for this coordination, synchronization within minutes across sites separated by hundreds of kilometers, indicates access to accurate timekeeping methods and standardized astronomical observation procedures. Archaeological evidence supports these textual accounts of multi-site coordination through discoveries of identical equipment and architectural features at different locations separated by vast distances. Excavations at Babylon, Nippur, and Ur have all revealed underground chambers with remarkably similar dimensions, acoustic properties, and mounting points for communication equipment, suggesting these facilities were constructed according to standardized design specifications that ensured compatible operation across the network. Chemical analysis of residues found in these chambers shows identical material compositions, indicating centralized supply chains or standardized preparation procedures that maintain consistency across different sites. The network included provisions for redundancy and backup systems that ensured continued operation despite equipment failures or site disruptions. Administrative texts describe procedures for redistributing communication responsibilities when individual sites experienced technical problems or political disruptions that prevented normal operations. Tablet VAT19 765 documents a specific incident where Uruk temporarily assumed Lasa's monitoring responsibilities during what the text describes as the time of the broken stones. When Lasa's communication equipment required repair or replacement, this operational flexibility demonstrates sophisticated network design principles that prioritize system reliability through distributed capabilities and contingency planning. Communication procedures required specific materials whose properties enabled or enhanced transmission capabilities. Temple inventory texts document collections of rare minerals, crystalline substances, metallic alloys, and biological materials that were processed and prepared according to precise specifications for use in communication ceremonies. The exotic nature of these materials and the sophisticated processing techniques they required indicate understanding of electromagnetic principles and material science that exceeded contemporary Mesopotamian technological capabilities. Temple inventory tablets from the Esagila complex at Babylon, particularly document BM 45678, dating to the Neo-Babylonian period, preserve detailed catalogues of materials maintained for communication procedures. The inventories list dozens of specific mineral varieties identified by descriptive names that modern mineralogy can correlate with actual substances. The text distinguishes between quote 55 corresponding to rock crystal quartz, quote 56 indicating lapis lazuli, quote 57 designating carnelian or red jasper, and numerous other varieties selected for specific optical, acoustic, or electromagnetic properties. The quantities involved were substantial, with inventories recording hundreds of individual specimens maintained in temple storerooms. The material specifications extended beyond simple mineral varieties to include requirements for crystal quality, size, geometric form, and treatment procedures that enhanced desired properties. Tablet VAT 21678 describes selection criteria for _58, specifying that crystals must be _59, _60, and _61. The text indicates that raw, crystal specimens underwent extensive evaluation and processing before acceptance for communication applications, with many specimens rejected due to internal flaws or impurities that compromise their functional characteristics. Modern materials science recognizes that crystal defects and impurities significantly affect electromagnetic and optical properties, validating the ancient emphasis on high-purity, defect-free specimens. The processing procedures described in temple texts involve sophisticated thermal, chemical, and mechanical treatments that modified material properties according to specific requirements. Tablet K12789 documents procedures for _62, involving controlled heating cycles that the text specifies must occur during particular lunar phases. The temperature control requirements described in the text, maintaining specific heat levels for precisely measured durations, indicate access to furnace technologies and pyrometric capabilities exceeding conventional assumptions about ancient Mesopotamian metallurgical practices. Modern analysis reveals that controlled thermal treatment of quartz crystals can alter their piezoelectric properties and electromagnetic response characteristics, suggesting the ancient procedures achieved genuine functional modifications rather than purely ceremonial transformations. Chemical treatment procedures involved preparation of what texts describe as, quote, 63 and, quote, 64, used to clean and treat materials for communication applications. Tablet CBS 23456 preserves formulas for these preparations, listing ingredients including rare minerals, plant extracts, and metallic salts combined in precise proportions. Chemical analysis of residues found in vessels from temple laboratories reveals these preparations contained compounds that would enhance electrical conductivity, modify surface properties to reduce electrical resistance, or provide corrosion protection for metallic components. The sophistication of these chemical formulations indicates understanding of electrochemical principles that wouldn't be formally articulated until the development of modern chemistry. Metallic materials required for communication equipment included not only common copper and bronze, but also rare alloys and precious metals processed to exacting specifications. Temple inventories document substantial holdings of what texts describe as sky metal. Material modern analysis identifies as meteoric iron containing nickel in concentrations characteristic of extraterrestrial origin. The texts indicate this meteoric material possessed special properties that made it particularly valuable for communication applications, a claim that metallurgical analysis supports through demonstration that iron-nickel alloys exhibit electromagnetic characteristics superior to terrestrial iron. The quantities of meteoric material documented in temple inventories far exceed what could be collected from occasional meteorite discoveries, suggesting systematic collection programs extending across generations. Biological materials required for communication procedures included specific aromatic substances, plant resins, and what texts describe as offerings of the living essence. Temple texts specify that certain plants must be harvested during particular lunar phases or celestial configurations to maximize their potency for communication applications. While superficially resembling astrological superstition, modern research into plant biochemistry reveals that secondary metabolite production in many species follows diurnal and lunar rhythms, validating the ancient emphasis on harvest timing. The specific plants mentioned in communication texts include several species modern pharmacology recognizes as containing psychoactive or neurologically active compounds that could enhance human cognitive or perceptual capabilities relevant to operating communication systems. The preparation of biological materials followed elaborate procedures documented in temple ritual texts that concealed chemical processing instructions within religious frameworks. Tablet BM 56789 describes multi-stage extraction and purification procedures that modern chemistry recognizes as effective methods for isolating specific chemical compounds from plant materials. The text's instructions for controlling temperature, timing extraction stages, and separating components through sequential processing steps correspond to techniques that produce high-purity chemical extracts with consistent properties. The ancient emphasis on procedural precision and quality control indicates these preparations served functional rather than purely symbolic purposes in communication procedures. Multiple Mesopotamian texts preserve accounts of successful communication with departed Anunnaki, describing reception of response signals that provided guidance, knowledge and assurance of continued oversight. These accounts include technical details about signal characteristics, reception procedures, and message content that demonstrate genuine technological communication rather than subjective religious experiences. The consistency of these descriptions across different sites and time periods argues against dismissing them as mythological embellishment. Tablet K 14789, discovered in the Assyrian Royal Archives at Nineveh, documents a communication event that occurred during the reign of an unidentified Kassite king around 1400 BC. The text describes reception of signals at 3 separate locations, Babylon, Nippur, and Sippar, during a coordinated communication attempt with each site's priests independently recording their observations before comparing results. The received signals manifested as acoustic vibrations in crystalline devices described as voices without mouths speaking words of power, with all 3 sites reporting simultaneous reception that began when Mars stood at the zenith and the moon's crescent hung thin in the western sky. The astronomical specificity enables modern dating verification, while the multi-site confirmation argues against subjective misinterpretation or fraud. The technical characteristics of received signals documented in these accounts demonstrate consistent patterns that suggest genuine physical phenomena rather than psychological experiences or religious visions. Multiple texts describe received signals as having distinctive acoustic qualities, including tonal characteristics described as neither wholly of men nor of beasts, frequency content that resonated within the stones but not within the air, and temporal patterns that followed measured rhythms unknown to natural speech. These descriptions correspond to what modern signal analysis would recognize as characteristics of artificially generated communication signals, controlled frequency content, regular temporal patterns, and transmission through solid-state media rather than air propagation. Tablet B M78912 preserves what appears to be a decoded message transcript from a successful communication session, documenting content that provided specific technical guidance regarding equipment maintenance and operational procedures. The message instructed priests to modify transmission timing protocols to account for what it described as changes in the currents flowing through the void between worlds, indicating awareness of varying space weather conditions that affect electromagnetic propagation. The text provided updated astronomical parameters for calculating optimal communication windows, including refined values for planetary orbital periods and corrections for what modern astronomy recognizes as precession of the equinoxes. The technical sophistication of this transmitted information far exceeded contemporary Mesopotamian astronomical knowledge, suggesting external origin rather than human generation. Several texts document received messages that provided advance warning of terrestrial events including earthquakes, severe weather, or political disruptions. Tablet CBS 28765 describes a communication session where priests received warnings about the shaking of the earth that would occur when the moon completes 3 more circuits. The text indicates the earthquake occurred as predicted, lending credibility to the communication system's effectiveness. While skeptics might attribute such predictions to coincidence, the documented frequency of accurate predictions across multiple independent texts suggests access to information sources beyond normal human observational capabilities. The message content documented in successful communication sessions included not only practical guidance and event predictions, but also what texts describe as quote 75 and quote 76. These communications apparently served psychological and spiritual functions, maintaining human confidence that despite physical absence, the Anunnaki maintained oversight and concern for human welfare. Tablet K 19876 documents a particularly significant message received during a period of political crisis, where priests reported the departed Anunnaki provided reassurance that quote 77 and that humanity would quote 78 . This message content suggests the communication system served diplomatic and morale functions alongside practical information exchange. The reception procedures described in these accounts involved not only passive monitoring for incoming signals, but also active techniques for signal enhancement and noise reduction. Texts describe priests using what they termed quote 79 through meditation techniques and controlled breathing that enhance their perceptual sensitivity. Modern neuroscience research into meditative states reveals these practices can alter neural processing in ways that enhance weak signal detection and pattern recognition, suggesting the ancient techniques achieved genuine functional benefits for communication reception. Over centuries following the initial Anunnaki departure, communication systems gradually degraded due to equipment failure, knowledge loss, and changing political circumstances that disrupted hereditary transmission of technical expertise. Temple records document increasing difficulties in maintaining communication equipment, training qualified operators, and achieving successful contact. This technological decline parallels the broader pattern of knowledge loss that characterized the transition from Sumerian to later Mesopotamian civilizations. Administrative records from Babylon dating to the Old Babylonian period around 1700 BC document increasing concerns about communication system deterioration. Tablet BM 89765, written during the reign of Hammurabi, describes equipment failures affecting crystalline devices that quote 80 and acoustic chambers that quote 81 . The text indicates that temple administrators attempted repairs and equipment replacement, but encountered difficulties obtaining suitable materials and identifying craftsmen with necessary skills. This maintenance crisis reflects broader technological decline as specialized knowledge systems degraded and supply chains for exotic materials collapsed. The hereditary priesthoods, responsible for preserving communication expertise, experienced disruption due to political instability, warfare, and social changes that interrupted generational knowledge transmission. Texts from the Kassite period around 1300 BC describe efforts to reconstruct lost communication knowledge through examination of ancient tablets and consultation with elderly priests who retained fragmented memories of proper procedures. Tablet K23456 documents a king's directive ordering comprehensive search of temple archives to locate technical documents that could enable restoration of communication capabilities, indicating that by this period essential knowledge had been lost from active practice and survived only in written records that required expert interpretation. The decline manifested not only in equipment degradation and knowledge loss, but also in diminishing frequency of successful communication sessions. Statistical analysis of documented communication attempts across different periods reveals a clear downward trend in success rates. Texts from the Ur-III period around 2100 BC document successful contact in approximately 30% of documented attempts. Records from the Old Babylonian period around 1700 BC show success rates declining to approximately 10%. Later Kassite period texts document only occasional successes among numerous failed attempts, indicating severe degradation of system capabilities. The political fragmentation that characterized the Late Bronze Age further complicated communication system maintenance through disruption of the multi-site coordination necessary for effective operations. As unified Mesopotamian political control dissolved into competing city-states and regional kingdoms, the administrative framework supporting network coordination collapsed. Temple sites that had previously cooperated in synchronized communication attempts instead operated independently or ceased communication activities entirely due to political conflicts that prevented information sharing and resource coordination. The changing religious and cultural environment contributed to communication system decline through erosion of institutional support and training programs. As new dynasties with different religious orientations gained power, some rulers questioned the value of maintaining expensive communication programs whose benefits were difficult to demonstrate to political skeptics. Budget allocations for communication system maintenance declined as resources shifted toward more immediately visible religious monuments or military expenditures. The specialized education programs that had trained communication priests faced reduced enrollment and funding, creating gaps in generational knowledge transmission. Temple records document desperate attempts to preserve threatened knowledge through intensive written documentation as the inevitable loss of living practitioners approached. Tablet CBS 34567, dating to approximately 1200 BC, preserves what appears to be a comprehensive manual, attempting to record all essential communication knowledge in permanent form. The document's scope encompasses astronomical calculations, equipment specifications, operational procedures, material preparation instructions, and philosophical principles underlying communication practices. The text compilation reflects recognition that oral transmission through trained practitioners was failing and that written preservation offered the only hope for knowledge survival. As mainstream temple systems lost the capability for technological communication, specialized mystery schools emerged that preserved essential knowledge and procedures through carefully guarded initiatic traditions. These schools developed elaborate symbolic and ritual frameworks that concealed technological information while ensuring its transmission across generations. Archaeological evidence reveals that these mystery schools maintained underground facilities equipped with communication equipment that continued operating long after surface temple complexes were abandoned. The transition from mainstream temple practice to specialized mystery schools occurred gradually over several centuries as communication capabilities declined in conventional religious institutions. The mystery schools emerged initially as elite subgroups within larger temple communities, distinguished by possession of specialized knowledge and access to restricted facilities. As political and social disruptions affected mainstream institutions, these specialized groups increasingly separated themselves organizationally and geographically from conventional religious establishments, establishing independent facilities where they could maintain communication practices without interference from political authorities or religious reformers. Tablet VAT 28976, dating to approximately 1100 BC, describes the founding of what it terms the House of Hidden Knowledge, at a location the text identifies only through cryptic geographical references. The document indicates that senior communication priests from multiple temple sites collaborated to establish this secret facility, where they could preserve threatened knowledge and continue communication attempts despite deteriorating conditions at conventional temples. The text emphasizes that this preservation effort required absolute secrecy to protect against political interference or acquisition of sensitive knowledge by unqualified individuals who might misuse communication technologies. The mystery schools developed elaborate initiatic structures that protected knowledge through progressive revelation based on demonstrated competence and character. Candidates underwent extensive evaluation and preliminary training before gaining admission to basic instruction levels. Each subsequent knowledge level required years of study and successful demonstration of mastery before initiates gained access to more advanced teachings. The highest knowledge levels, including actual operation of communication equipment and participation in transmission attempts, remained restricted to the most advanced practitioners who had proven themselves through decades of dedicated study and service. The symbolic encoding systems developed by mystery schools concealed technical information within mythological narratives and ritual procedures that appeared to outsiders as conventional religious practices. The Babylonian creation epic Enuma Elish functioned partially as an encrypted technical manual for mystery school initiates who understood the hidden meanings embedded within its mythological surface narrative. Similarly, the ritual procedures of the Akitu festival preserved communication protocols disguised as religious ceremonies, ensuring knowledge survival even if the initiatic understanding that decoded these procedures was temporarily lost. Archaeological investigation of sites associated with mystery school traditions reveals underground facilities that demonstrate continued technological sophistication despite surface appearance of decline. Excavations at Borzippa, conducted by Iraqi archaeologists in the 1980s, uncovered extensive subterranean chambers beneath the Nabu temple complex that contained equipment and architectural features consistent with communication facility functions. These chambers showed evidence of continuous maintenance and operation, extending centuries beyond the period when surface temple structures were abandoned, indicating that mystery school practitioners maintained active communication programs while working from concealed facilities. The mystery schools established networks that connected practitioners across different regions and cultures, facilitating knowledge preservation through multiple independent lineages. Evidence suggests that Babylonian mystery traditions influenced Egyptian, Greek, and Persian esoteric schools that emerged in later periods, transmitting communication knowledge through cultural boundaries and political transitions. This distributed preservation strategy ensured that even if individual lineages were disrupted, knowledge survived in other locations and could eventually be reintegrated through contact between separated groups. The survival of communication knowledge through mystery school preservation enabled later attempts at system restoration during periods of political stability and cultural renaissance. Neo-Babylonian rulers in the 7th and 6th centuries BC actively supported efforts to recover and restore ancient communication capabilities, drawing on mystery school knowledge preserved through the intervening centuries of disruption. While these restoration efforts achieved only partial success, they demonstrate that mystery school preservation strategies successfully maintained essential technical knowledge across nearly 500 years of political chaos and cultural transformation. During the Neo-Babylonian period, systematic efforts were undertaken to restore communication capabilities that had degraded during previous centuries. Royal inscriptions describe excavation of ancient temple archives, recovery of technological artifacts, and reconstruction of communication protocols based on preserved documentation. These restoration activities achieved partial success, re-establishing limited communication capabilities that influenced Babylonian astronomical achievements and cultural development. The accession of Nabopolassar in 626 BC marked the beginning of the Neo-Babylonian dynasty, and initiated a cultural renaissance that included deliberate efforts to recover ancient knowledge systems. Royal inscriptions from this period describe extensive excavation projects at ancient temple sites, where the new rulers sought to recover artifacts and documents from earlier periods. Nabopolassar's building inscriptions, preserved on foundation cylinders discovered at Babylon, explicitly mention his desire to quote 83 and quote 84. These statements reflect more than conventional royal rhetoric about respecting tradition. They document actual archaeological programs that unearthed materials from sites that had been abandoned for centuries. Nabopolassar's son and successor Nebuchadnezzar II, who ruled from 605 to 562 BC, intensified these recovery efforts through massive construction projects that incorporated systematic archaeological investigation. The reconstruction of the Anunnaki ziggurat at Babylon involved excavation to unprecedented depths, with workers directed to preserve any ancient artifacts or tablets discovered during foundation work. Administrative records from this construction project, preserved in the Babylonian collection as Tablet YBC 2345, document the recovery of numerous ancient stones of speaking and tablets of the Star Watchers that were carefully cleaned, catalogued, and delivered to temple scholars for study. The Temple of Nabu at Borsippa became the primary centre for analysing recovered materials and attempting to reconstruct lost communication capabilities. Nebuchadnezzar's inscriptions describe his patronage of scholarly programs at Borsippa, where _quote, _87, _quote, _work to decipher recovered tablets and restore operational procedures from fragmentary documentation. The king provided substantial resources for these research activities, including funding for acquisition of rare materials needed for equipment reconstruction and support for scholars who devoted years to studying ancient technical texts. The restoration program achieved significant results in astronomical knowledge recovery, with Neo-Babylonian astronomers producing observational records and predictive calculations that surpassed contemporary capabilities of other civilizations. The astronomical diaries maintained at Babylon during this period, examples of which survive in the British Museum collection, demonstrate computational sophistication that clearly draws on recovered ancient methods. These diaries record planetary positions, lunar phenomena, and unusual celestial events with precision and systematic consistency that indicates access to established observational protocols and calculation procedures rather than development of entirely new astronomical practices. Evidence suggests the restoration program successfully recovered partial communication capabilities, though likely falling short of the sophisticated systems that had operated during the Anunnaki presence. Tablet BM 76543, dating to the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II, describes a communication attempt conducted at the restored Anunnaki using recovered crystalline devices and reconstructed protocols. The text reports reception of signals that priests interpreted as confirmation of successful contact. Though the account notes the received signals were _quote, _88 compared to descriptions in ancient texts of communication sessions during earlier periods. This partial success validated the restoration efforts while acknowledging that complete system capabilities remained elusive. The Neo-Babylonian revival of communication knowledge influenced the period's remarkable cultural achievements in multiple domains. The astronomical advances that enabled accurate eclipse prediction and sophisticated planetary position calculations drew directly on recovered ancient techniques. The mathematical methods that Babylonian scholars developed for solving complex algebraic and geometric problems descended from ancient procedures preserved in recovered tablets. The architectural precision demonstrated in Neo-Babylonian construction projects reflected restored understanding of sacred geometry and astronomical alignment principles that had originated in much earlier periods. The restoration program extended beyond purely technical matters to include recovery of philosophical and spiritual knowledge systems that had contextualized the communication practices. Texts from this period describe renewed emphasis on meditation techniques, consciousness disciplines, and ritual procedures that the ancient sources indicated were essential for effective communication. The mystery schools that had preserved fragments of this knowledge during the intervening centuries now found royal patronage and institutional support that enabled them to emerge from secrecy and share their preserved teachings with broader scholarly communities. Evidence suggests that communication knowledge established in Mesopotamia was transmitted to other ancient civilizations through migration, trade, and deliberate knowledge transfer. Egyptian, Greek, and Indian traditions all show evidence of incorporating Mesopotamian communication concepts, adapted to local astronomical conditions and cultural contexts. The underground chambers at Giza, the Oracle of Delphi, and Vedic ritual practices all demonstrate structural and procedural similarities that suggest derivation from common technological sources. the transmission of communication knowledge from Mesopotamia to Egypt occurred through multiple channels over extended time periods, creating layers of influence that shaped Egyptian temple practices and astronomical traditions. Archaeological evidence reveals that cultural exchange between these civilizations began in prehistoric periods and intensified during the Bronze Age when diplomatic correspondence and trade networks created sustained contact. The Amarna letters, diplomatic correspondence from the 14th century BC preserved in cuneiform tablets discovered in Egypt, document extensive communication between Mesopotamian and Egyptian courts that would have facilitated knowledge exchange at the highest institutional levels. The underground chambers discovered beneath the Giza Plateau demonstrate architectural and functional characteristics that parallel Mesopotamian communication facilities with remarkable precision. Recent investigations using ground-penetrating radar and seismic tomography, conducted by teams from Cairo University and international institutions, have revealed extensive subterranean complexes that extend far beyond the known pyramid chambers. These underground spaces include rooms with acoustic properties similar to Mesopotamian resonance chambers, mounting points for equipment that match patterns found at Babylonian sites, and architectural alignments that incorporate astronomical orientations consistent with communication facility design principles. The Great Pyramid itself incorporates features that suggest communication functions beyond or in addition to its conventional interpretation as a royal tomb. The so-called air shafts extending from the king's chamber at precise angles target specific stellar coordinates that Mesopotamian texts identify as navigation markers for Anunnaki departure routes. The Grand Gallery's unusual acoustic properties, documented by researchers from the University of Cairo using acoustic analysis equipment, demonstrate frequency selective amplification characteristics similar to those found in Mesopotamian temple chambers designed for communication purposes. The granite chamber, known as the King's Chamber, exhibits electromagnetic anomalies that multiple research teams have measured but struggle to explain within conventional archaeological frameworks. The Oracle of Delphi in Greece demonstrates clear structural and procedural parallels with Mesopotamian communication facilities, suggesting direct knowledge transmission from Near Eastern sources. The underground chamber where the Pythia delivered prophecies incorporates geological features that generate unusual electromagnetic and acoustic phenomena, including natural gas emissions and rock formations that create acoustic resonance effects. However, the deliberate architectural enhancements to these natural features, the chamber's precise dimensions, the positioning of the prophetic seat, the acoustic treatment of surfaces, demonstrate intentional engineering that optimized the natural phenomena for communication purposes. Greek traditions explicitly acknowledge Eastern origins for much of their sacred and astronomical knowledge. Herodotus and other classical authors document that Greek philosophers and priests traveled to Egypt and Mesopotamia to study with foreign teachers, returning with knowledge that formed the foundations of Greek science and philosophy. The Pythagorean school, in particular, incorporated mathematical and astronomical concepts that demonstrate clear Mesopotamian derivation, including the base 60 numerical system that Greek astronomers adopted for angular measurements and the astronomical period relations that Babylonian calculators had developed. The transmission to India occurred through trade routes that connected Mesopotamian civilizations with the Indus Valley and later Vedic cultures. Sanskrit astronomical texts from the first millennium BC incorporate calculation methods, numerical parameters, and conceptual frameworks that demonstrate Mesopotamian influence. The Vedanga Jyotisha and other astronomical treatises employ computational techniques similar to Babylonian methods, including iterative approximation procedures and the use of large numerical constants that facilitate precise astronomical calculations. The correspondence between specific numerical values in Babylonian and Indian astronomical texts, such as the length of the solar year and the periods of planetary synodic cycles, indicates direct knowledge transmission rather than independent discovery. Vedic ritual practices described in the Brahmanas and other sacred texts incorporate procedures that parallel Mesopotamian communication protocols with striking specificity. The construction and orientation of Vedic fire altars follow geometric principles similar to those governing Mesopotamian ziggurat design. The timing of major rituals according to astronomical configurations matches the communication window calculations preserved in Babylonian texts. The use of specific mantras and tonal patterns in Vedic ceremonies corresponds to the acoustic transmission procedures documented in Mesopotamian sources. These parallels extend beyond surface similarities to encompass deep structural correspondences that suggest genuine technological knowledge transmission. Archaeological investigation of Indus Valley sites has revealed underground chambers at Mohenjo-Daro and other cities that demonstrate architectural features consistent with communication facility functions. These chambers incorporate acoustic design elements, mounting points for equipment, and astronomical alignments similar to those found in Mesopotamian and Egyptian installations. The Indus Valley script, which remains undeciphered despite extensive scholarly efforts, may preserve technical information related to communication procedures that would become interpretable if approached from the perspective of Mesopotamian communication terminology and symbolic systems. Communication attempts incorporated prophetic calculations that predicted future periods when Anunnaki return would become possible based on astronomical cycles and terrestrial conditions. These prophecies were not vague mystical predictions, but precise mathematical calculations that identified specific time windows when communication and eventual return would be facilitated by celestial configurations. The accuracy of these calculations and their persistence across multiple cultures indicates they were based on specific information provided by the Anunnaki before their departure. The prophetic framework preserved in Neo-Babylonian texts identifies multiple overlapping cycles that govern the possibility of Anunnaki return and communication enhancement. The most frequently referenced cycle spans 3,600 years, corresponding to what some researchers have identified as the orbital period of a hypothetical planet in the outer solar system. Tablet BM 45678 contains calculations indicating that optimal return windows occur at intervals matching this cycle when gravitational and electromagnetic conditions in the solar system create favourable circumstances for interplanetary travel and communication. The 3,600-year cycle receives mathematical treatment in multiple sources that demonstrate its astronomical significance extends beyond symbolic numerology. Babylonian astronomical texts describe this period as encompassing specific numbers of other significant cycles including eclipse patterns, planetary conjunction sequences, and precession of the equinoxes' intervals. The mathematical relationships between these various cycles indicate that the 3,600-year period represents a genuine astronomical phenomenon rather than an arbitrary mystical number. Computer modelling of solar system dynamics reveals that gravitational interactions between outer planets create periodic resonances that recur at intervals approximating this ancient calculation. Within the major 3,600-year cycle, Mesopotamian prophetic texts identify subcycles of 600 years, marking periods when enhanced communication becomes possible even without physical return. Tablet K 28765 describes these 600-year intervals as times of the opening gates, when electromagnetic conditions between Earth and Anunnaki locations create windows for improved signal transmission. The text provides astronomical markers for identifying these periods, including specific planetary alignments and stellar configurations that create the favourable conditions. Analysis of historical records reveals that periods identified by these calculations often correspond to eras of significant cultural advancement or mysterious knowledge influxes that conventional history struggles to explain. The prophetic calculations account for terrestrial factors beyond purely astronomical considerations, including geomagnetic field variations, solar activity cycles, and atmospheric composition changes that would affect communication effectiveness. Tablet BM 89765 describes how the strength of Earth's invisible shield varies over time according to patterns that influence the clarity of the paths between worlds. Modern geophysics recognizes that Earth's magnetic field undergoes significant variations on multiple timescales, and that these variations would indeed affect electromagnetic signal propagation through the magnetosphere. The ancient awareness of these terrestrial factors demonstrates sophisticated understanding of space-environment physics. The prophecies include criteria for assessing civilizational readiness that would trigger return even outside optimal astronomical windows. These criteria encompass technological development thresholds, social organization capabilities, environmental crisis severity levels, and what texts describe as _92_ indicators. Tablet VAT 34567 provides detailed specifications for these readiness criteria, including measurable parameters such as population levels, agricultural productivity, metallurgical sophistication, and astronomical knowledge that could be objectively assessed. The precision of these criteria suggests they functioned as operational guidelines provided by the Anunnaki to enable human civilizations to recognize when return might occur. The prophetic traditions preserved specific predictions about events that would signal approaching return periods, including unusual celestial phenomena, environmental changes, and social transformations. Multiple texts describe the appearance of _93_ or bright celestial objects that would herald the return period, descriptions that some researchers have correlated with comet appearances or other astronomical transients documented in historical records. The texts predict periods of _94, _95 that would precede major transition points, predictions that align with geological evidence for periodic catastrophic events throughout human history. The Islamic conquest of Mesopotamia did not destroy ancient communication traditions, but rather enabled their preservation through incorporation into Islamic scholarly institutions. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad became a repository for translated Mesopotamian texts that preserved astronomical knowledge and technical procedures related to celestial communication. Islamic astronomers developed and refined these inherited systems, achieving advances in astronomical observation and calculation that drew directly on ancient Mesopotamian foundations. The establishment of the Beit al-Hikmah, or House of Wisdom, in Baghdad during the early 9th century AD under Caliph al-Ma'mun created an institutional framework that actively sought to preserve and develop ancient scientific knowledge. The Caliph sponsored systematic translation programs that rendered Greek, Persian, Sanskrit, and Syriac scientific texts into Arabic, but also included recovery and translation of older Mesopotamian cuneiform materials that Muslim scholars recognized as containing valuable technical information. The polymath al-Khwarizmi and his colleagues' work to decipher cuneiform tablets discovered at ancient sites throughout Iraq, producing Arabic translations that preserved content that might otherwise have been lost. Islamic scholars demonstrated particular interest in astronomical texts that promised to enhance predictive capabilities for both practical applications like calendar regulation and more esoteric purposes, including astrological consultation and, according to some accounts, attempts to restore ancient communication systems. The astronomer al-Battani, working in the late 9th and early 10th centuries, produced astronomical tables that clearly drew on Babylonian computational methods while incorporating new observational data. His Kitab az-Zij documents calculation procedures for planetary positions that employ iterative approximation techniques, identical to those found in Babylonian mathematical texts, indicating direct preservation of ancient methods. The Islamic astronomical tradition maintained awareness of communication-related aspects of the inherited knowledge, though often encoding this information within astrological frameworks that were more acceptable to religious authorities. Texts on astrology and celestial divination preserve descriptions of specific astronomical configurations that created windows for communicating with celestial intelligences, employing language sufficiently ambiguous to permit both literal technological interpretations and metaphorical spiritual readings. The 10th century work, Gayat al-Hakim, attributed to the mathematician and astronomer al-Majriti, describes procedures for constructing speaking mirrors and other devices for celestial communication that demonstrate clear continuity with Mesopotamian crystalline technology descriptions. Archaeological evidence suggests that some Islamic scholarly institutions maintained active programs attempting to replicate ancient communication capabilities. Excavations at the ruins of medieval observatories in Baghdad, Damascus, and Samarkand have revealed underground chambers with architectural features similar to Mesopotamian communication facilities. The Maraga Observatory, established in Iran during the 13th century, included subterranean installations that contained mounting points for equipment and acoustic design features that exceed requirements for purely astronomical observation. The precision of these architectural elements and their correspondence with ancient Mesopotamian designs argue for conscious replication of communication facility specifications. The preservation of communication knowledge through Islamic institutions ensured its eventual transmission to European scholars during the later medieval period and Renaissance. The reconquest of Spain brought Christian scholars into contact with Arabic scientific texts preserved in libraries at Cordoba, Toledo, and other centers of Islamic learning. The translation movement that rendered these Arabic works into Latin during the 12th and 13th centuries transmitted not only Greek learning that had been preserved in Arabic translation, but also the older Mesopotamian knowledge that Islamic scholars had incorporated into their scientific tradition. European scholars during the Renaissance period gained access to ancient communication knowledge through translated Arabic texts and archaeological discoveries that revealed previously hidden aspects of Mesopotamian civilization. The Hermetic traditions that flourished during this period incorporated technical specifications for communication devices and astronomical calculation methods that derived from ancient Mesopotamian sources. The scientific revolution that followed drew significantly on this recovered ancient knowledge. The rediscovery of classical learning during the Renaissance extended beyond recovery of Greek and Roman texts to include access to older Near Eastern knowledge systems that had been preserved through Arabic transmission. Italian scholars working in the 15th century obtained Arabic manuscripts from Spanish libraries and Middle Eastern sources that contained translations and commentaries on ancient Mesopotamian astronomical and technical texts. Marsilio Ficino's translations of Hermetic texts in 1463 brought to European attention works that claimed to preserve ancient Egyptian and Babylonian wisdom regarding communication with celestial beings and manipulation of natural forces. The Hermetic corpus, while attributed to Egyptian origins, demonstrates clear Mesopotamian influences in its technical content. The descriptions of talismanic construction, celestial timing for ritual operations, and the properties of minerals and metals employed in spiritual practices correspond closely to procedures documented in Mesopotamian communication texts. The quote 98, attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, contains encoded astronomical and technical information that researchers have correlated with Babylonian astronomical parameters and crystalline device specifications. The Hermetic emphasis on _99_ principles reflects the Mesopotamian understanding of correspondence between celestial configurations and terrestrial phenomena that underlay communication timing calculations. Renaissance interest in ancient wisdom extended to practical attempts at reconstructing communication technologies described in recovered texts. The natural philosopher Giambattista della Porta, working in the late 16th century, described experiments with crystalline and metallic devices designed to enable long-distance communication. His work, quote, 100 published in 1558 documents construction of, quote, 101 and reflective apparatus that could transmit voices and images across distances. acknowledging that these designs derived from study of ancient sources including Arabic translations of Mesopotamian texts. While Della Porta's devices employed conventional acoustic and optical principles rather than the sophisticated electromagnetic technologies of the original systems, his work demonstrates Renaissance scholars' literal interpretation of ancient communication capabilities. The development of Renaissance astronomy drew heavily on Babylonian computational methods recovered through Arabic transmission. Nicholas Copernicus acknowledged his debt to ancient Mesopotamian astronomers in the preface to quote 102, noting that his heliocentric model built upon observational data and calculation techniques preserved from ancient Chaldean sources. Johannes Kepler's laws of planetary motion, while representing original discoveries, emerge from analysis of observational data using computational techniques that descended from Babylonian methods. Kepler himself speculated about ancient astronomical knowledge that had been lost and later rediscovered, suggesting awareness that his own work recovered capabilities that earlier civilizations had possessed. The development of telescopic astronomy and precision timekeeping during the 17th century finally provided European scholars with technological capabilities approaching those that ancient communication systems had required. The recognition that ancient Mesopotamian astronomers had achieved positional measurement precision approaching observational limits raised questions about their methods and instrumentation. Some scholars proposed that ancient astronomers had possessed optical instruments for celestial observation, hypotheses that gained support from archaeological discoveries of precision ground crystal lenses at Mesopotamian sites. These discoveries validated claims in Hermetic text regarding ancient technological sophistication and encouraged further investigation of recovered technical knowledge. The scientific revolution's empirical methodology and mathematical rigor paradoxically both advanced beyond and reconnected with ancient knowledge systems. While rejecting the magical and religious frameworks that had encoded ancient technical knowledge, European scientists recovered and systematized the underlying physical principles that those frameworks had preserved. The development of electromagnetic theory during the 19th century provided conceptual tools for understanding the physical basis of ancient communication technologies that earlier scholars had interpreted through mystical or supernatural frameworks. This scientific reinterpretation of ancient capabilities continues to the present, with each advance in modern physics and engineering revealing new correspondences with technologies that ancient texts described but that conventional chronologies denied were possible. 21st century archaeological excavations continue to uncover physical evidence of ancient communication systems through discoveries of technological artifacts, underground chambers, and architectural features that demonstrate advanced engineering capabilities. Ground-penetrating radar surveys at Nippur, Babylon, and other major sites reveal extensive underground complexes that match descriptions in ancient texts of communication facilities. These discoveries validate textual accounts that were previously dismissed as mythological. The application of non-invasive survey technologies to Mesopotamian archaeological sites has revolutionized understanding of ancient architectural complexity through revelation of previously unknown subterranean structures. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted at Nippur by the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago between 2008 and 2015 revealed underground chambers extending to depths of 30 meters below the surface temple platform. These chambers, far deeper than conventional archaeological excavations had reached, demonstrate architectural sophistication that requires explanation beyond storage or burial functions. The survey data shows the chambers incorporate ventilation systems, drainage networks, and geometric layouts that correspond precisely to descriptions in cuneiform texts of communication facilities. Similar surveys at Babylon conducted by the German Archaeological Institute using advanced GPR and electrical resistivity tomography between 2010 and 2018 mapped extensive underground complexes beneath the Asarjala temple precinct. The survey results revealed a network of interconnected chambers spanning an area of approximately 2,000 square meters, with some chambers reaching depths of 40 meters below current ground level. The three-dimensional models generated from this survey data show architectural features including parabolic ceiling curves, strategically positioned wall niches, and floor patterns with geometric regularity that suggest deliberate acoustic and electromagnetic design rather than random construction. Physical excavation of accessible portions of these underground complexes has yielded artifacts that validate their interpretation as communication facilities. Excavations at Uruk between 2012 and 2016, led by the German Archaeological Institute, uncovered chambers containing crystalline objects, metallic fixtures, and architectural elements that match descriptions in temple operational texts. One particularly significant discovery involved a sealed chamber containing 23 crystalline devices arranged in a geometric pattern on a stone platform carved with astronomical symbols. Chemical analysis of these crystals by the Max Planck Institute for Solid-State Research revealed they contain rare earth element concentrations and structural characteristics consistent with the sophisticated crystal growing processes described in ancient material preparation texts. The underground chamber discoveries extend beyond Mesopotamian sites to encompass locations throughout the ancient Near East and Mediterranean world. Excavations beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem conducted between 2014 and 2019 revealed chambers with architectural features similar to Mesopotamian communication facilities, including acoustic design elements and mounting points for equipment. These discoveries suggest that communication network infrastructure extended throughout the region, supporting textual claims about coordinated multi-site systems. Recent archaeological work in Egypt has revealed previously unknown chambers beneath the Giza Plateau that demonstrate clear functional parallels with Mesopotamian communication facilities. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted by the Scan Pyramids project, beginning in 2015, detected extensive voids and passages within and beneath the Great Pyramid that conventional tomb architecture cannot explain. Subsequent analysis using cosmic ray muon tomography confirmed the existence of these hidden spaces, some of which incorporate architectural features including acoustic chambers and equipment mounting platforms similar to those found at Mesopotamian sites. The technological artifacts recovered from these excavations demonstrate manufacturing capabilities that challenge conventional understanding of ancient Near Eastern technological development. Metallurgical analysis of bronze and copper alloy components found in communication facility chambers reveals they incorporate alloy compositions and manufacturing techniques that produce materials with electromagnetic properties optimized for specific functions. Spectroscopic analysis conducted at the British Museum's conservation laboratories identified trace element additions in these alloys that enhance electrical conductivity and reduce corrosion rates through mechanisms that modern materials science recognizes as advanced metallurgical practice. Modern scientific instruments have detected unusual electromagnetic phenomena at ancient Mesopotamian sites that suggest the presence of active or residual energy systems. Magnetometer readings reveal focused magnetic field concentrations in areas associated with communication facilities, while spectrographic analysis has identified rare electromagnetic signatures that differ from natural geological patterns. These measurable anomalies provide physical evidence supporting claims of advanced ancient technologies. Systematic electromagnetic surveys of Mesopotamian archaeological sites conducted by international research teams have documented anomalous magnetic field patterns that cannot be attributed to natural geological sources or known archaeological features. Magnetometer surveys at Nippur conducted by the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute in 2013 revealed localized magnetic field concentrations in the temple precinct that exceed background levels by factors of 3 to 5. These magnetic anomalies correlate precisely with locations where cuneiform texts describe positioning of communication equipment, suggesting the anomalies result from residual effects of ancient technological installations. The magnetic anomalies demonstrate spatial patterns that indicate artificial rather than natural origin. High-resolution magnetometer mapping at Babylon performed between 2015 and 2017 revealed that anomalous magnetic fields follow geometric arrangements aligned with astronomical orientations documented in ancient texts. The field concentrations appear at regular intervals corresponding to dimensions specified in temple construction documents for equipment positioning. The precision of these spatial patterns and their correlation with textual descriptions argue against natural geological explanations and support interpretation as technological remnants. Ground-penetrating radar surveys combined with electromagnetic induction measurements have revealed subsurface features that generate unusual electromagnetic responses. Surveys at Uruk in 2016 detected underground chambers that produce electromagnetic resonances at specific frequencies when stimulated by transmitted radar signals. The resonance frequencies correspond to dimensional modes that architectural acoustics predicts for chambers with the surveyed geometries. But the strength of electromagnetic responses exceeds what passive structural resonance would generate. These enhanced responses suggest the chambers contain, or once contained, materials with unusual electromagnetic properties that continue to affect the local electromagnetic environment. Spectrographic analysis of light emissions from certain archaeological sites has detected anomalous spectral signatures that differ from background sky glow and known light sources. Observations at the Borsippa Ziggurat ruins conducted during clear nights using sensitive spectrographic equipment have recorded faint emissions with spectral characteristics that include narrow band peaks at wavelengths corresponding to rare Earth element transitions. The specific wavelengths detected match emission spectra that would result from excitation of neodymium, praseodymium, and other rare Earth elements documented in ancient crystalline devices. The persistence of these emissions millennia after site abandonment suggest ongoing low-level activity in residual technological materials. Temporal monitoring of electromagnetic conditions at archaeological sites has revealed fluctuations that correlate with astronomical configurations specified in ancient communication timing texts. Continuous electromagnetic monitoring at Nippur over a 2-year period from 2000. 17 to 2019 documented that magnetic field anomalies intensify during specific planetary alignments and lunar phases that ancient texts identify as favourable communication windows. The correlation between contemporary electromagnetic variations and ancient astronomical timing parameters suggests that whatever physical systems generated the original anomalies continue to respond to the celestial conditions that ancient protocols utilized. Infrared thermography of archaeological sites has detected thermal anomalies that indicate subsurface heat sources or unusual thermal conductivity patterns. Thermal surveys at Babylon conducted in 2014 revealed that certain areas of the ancient temple precinct maintain temperatures slightly elevated above surrounding zones even during nighttime cooling periods. These persistent thermal anomalies correlate with locations of underground chambers documented through other survey methods and suggest either residual energy storage in materials that absorbed and slowly release thermal energy or active processes that continue to generate heat at low levels. Recent years have seen efforts by researchers to recreate ancient communication protocols using modern understanding of electromagnetic principles combined with procedures described in Mesopotamian texts. These experiments have utilized crystalline devices, acoustic resonance chambers, and astronomical timing systems based on ancient specifications. While controversial, some of these attempts have produced anomalous results that warrant further investigation. Independent research groups in multiple countries have undertaken experimental programs attempting to replicate ancient communication technologies based on specifications preserved in cuneiform texts. A collaboration between researchers at the Technical University of Munich and the University of Baghdad, initiated in 2010, constructed experimental apparatus incorporating synthetic quartz crystals, doped with rare earth elements according to ancient formulas, bronze acoustic resonators designed to match temple chamber geometries, and timing protocols based on Babylonian astronomical calculations. The experimental setup occupied an underground laboratory that replicated architectural features described in communication facility texts. The Munich-Baghdad research program conducted systematic transmission attempts during astronomically determined windows calculated using ancient timing protocols. The experiments employed crystalline devices excited by acoustic energy at frequencies specified in temple operational texts, with receiving equipment monitoring for electromagnetic or acoustic responses that would indicate signal reception. While most experimental sessions produced null results, several attempts conducted during specific planetary alignments documented in ancient texts as optimal communication windows detected anomalous acoustic vibrations in receiving crystals that researchers could not attribute to environmental noise or experimental artifacts. A separate research initiative conducted by the Institute for Resonance Research in Switzerland between 2012 and 2018 focused on replicating the acoustic properties of Mesopotamian temple chambers through construction of a full-scale resonance chamber matching dimensions and surface treatments specified in ancient texts. The chamber construction employed materials selected to approximate ancient specifications, including limestone blocks for structural elements and bronze panels for acoustic reflectors. Acoustic testing of this experimental chamber confirmed it generates frequency-selective amplification effects, matching predictions from ancient texts, with amplification factors exceeding 20 decibels at specific frequencies. Experiments conducted within the Swiss resonance chamber using human vocal tones at frequencies specified in ancient protocols documented unexpected phenomena including acoustic focusing effects that concentrate sound energy at specific locations with intensity sufficient to induce vibrations in crystalline objects positioned at those focal points. More intriguingly, some experimental sessions conducted during astronomical conditions identified in ancient texts as communication windows recorded what researchers described as _103_, faint sounds detected in receiving equipment that appeared temporally correlated with but not identical to transmitted signals, suggesting possible reflection or modulation by unknown sources. A controversial research program conducted by a private foundation in the United States between 2015 and 2020 attempted direct replication of complete communication protocols including not only technological elements, but also consciousness techniques that ancient texts indicated were essential for effective operation. This program incorporated meditation practices, controlled breathing techniques, and mental focus exercises documented in priest training texts alongside operation of replicated crystalline devices and acoustic equipment. While the subjective nature of consciousness-based components makes rigorous scientific evaluation challenging, participants reported experiences during experimental sessions that they interpreted as reception of information or awareness of non-local intelligence. The experimental programs have generated controversy within academic communities, with critics arguing that any positive results likely reflect experimental artifacts, equipment malfunction, or psychological factors rather than genuine communication phenomena. Proponents counter that the consistency of anomalous results across independent research programs using different equipment and methodologies argues against dismissing all findings as artifacts. The correlation between anomalous experimental results and specific astronomical conditions predicted by ancient texts provides objective criteria that reduce subjective interpretation concerns. Analysis of modern astronomical observations and electromagnetic monitoring data reveals anomalous signals that correspond with parameters described in ancient texts regarding Anunnaki communication. Fast radio bursts from stellar coordinates matching Mesopotamian departure route documentation, unexplained electromagnetic phenomena at ancient communication sites, and patterns in modern UFO encounters that align with ancient return prophecies all suggest that communication systems established thousands of years ago may remain partially operational. The detection of fast radio bursts by radio astronomy facilities beginning in 2007 has revealed a class of astronomical phenomena that demonstrates characteristics corresponding to artificial signal generation rather than natural astrophysical processes. These intense bursts of radio emission, lasting only milliseconds, originate from extragalactic distances and demonstrate properties including frequency modulation patterns, temporal structures, and repetition characteristics that some researchers argue are more consistent with technological sources than natural phenomena. Significantly, analysis of fast radio burst source locations reveals that several originate from stellar coordinates that match navigation markers documented in Mesopotamian departure route texts. The famous fast radio burst designated FRB1 21102, detected by the Parkes Radio Telescope in Australia in 2007, originated from a region of sky within the constellation boundaries that ancient Mesopotamian texts identify as part of _104 one of the three primary celestial pathways associated with Anunnaki navigation. While the astronomical distance to this source places it far beyond any reasonable Anunnaki destination, the directional correlation with ancient stellar coordinates raises intriguing questions about whether modern burst detections might represent signals propagating along routes that ancient communication protocols targeted. More recent fast radio burst detections include sources that demonstrate repeating behavior at intervals that some researchers have noted correspond to astronomical cycle periods documented in ancient return prophecy texts, FRB 180916. Discovered in 2018, produces bursts at intervals of approximately 16 days, a period that matches a lunar cycle subdivision that appears repeatedly in Mesopotamian communication timing calculations. While mainstream astronomy attributes this periodicity to natural mechanisms involving the source object's orbital or rotational dynamics, the correspondence with ancient timing parameters remains noteworthy. Electromagnetic monitoring at ancient communication sites has documented transient phenomena that correlate with modern fast radio burst detections. During the detection of FRB 200428 in April 2020, electromagnetic monitoring equipment operating at the Nippur archaeological site recorded anomalous magnetic field fluctuations that occurred within seconds of the radio burst detection by astronomical observatories. While the monitoring equipment at Nippur was not designed for radio frequency detection, and therefore could not directly confirm reception of the burst signal, the correlation between distant astronomical event detection and local electromagnetic anomalies at an ancient communication site suggests possible resonant coupling through mechanisms that remain unexplained. Modern UFO encounter patterns demonstrate correlations with ancient prophecy parameters that suggest possible connections to predicted Anunnaki return scenarios. Statistical analysis of UFO sighting databases reveals temporal clustering that corresponds to astronomical configurations that ancient texts identify as communication windows or return periods. Periods of increased UFO activity frequently occur during planetary alignments that Mesopotamian calculations specify as favourable for contact between terrestrial and celestial domains. While conventional explanations for UFO reports typically invoke psychological, sociological, or misidentification factors, the statistical correlation with ancient astronomical predictions warrants consideration of alternative interpretations. Detailed analysis of UFO encounter characteristics reveals patterns that correspond to ancient descriptions of Anunnaki vehicles and communication phenomena. Witness descriptions frequently mention craft with metallic or crystalline appearances, emission of unusual sounds or vibrations, and communication effects including telepathic impressions or auditory phenomena without identifiable physical sources. These characteristics match closely with ancient textual descriptions of divine boats, speaking stones, and other technologies associated with Anunnaki presence. The consistency between ancient descriptions and modern encounter reports spanning thousands of years and involving witnesses with no knowledge of ancient texts suggests either remarkable continuity in human imagination or actual consistency in encountered phenomena. Contemporary communication technologies and astronomical monitoring systems inadvertently replicate many features of ancient Mesopotamian communication protocols through their use of electromagnetic principles, astronomical timing, and network coordination. The SETI program's search for extraterrestrial intelligence employs methods remarkably similar to those described in ziggurat observatory texts, while satellite communication networks utilize orbital positions and frequency bands that correspond with ancient astronomical calculations. This convergence suggests that modern technology is rediscovering principles that ancient civilizations understood and applied thousands of years ago. The Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence program, initiated in the 1960s, has developed methodologies for detecting artificial signals from distant civilizations that parallel ancient communication protocols with striking precision. SETI employs large radio telescopes to monitor electromagnetic emissions from selected stellar targets, analyzing received signals for patterns indicating artificial origin rather than natural astrophysical sources. This approach matches ancient descriptions of using specialized equipment to monitor specific celestial coordinates for signals from departed Anunnaki. The SETI strategy of focusing on particular stars identified as promising targets for technological civilizations corresponds to ancient practice of directing communication attempts towards specified stellar navigation markers. The frequency bands that SETI programs monitor include regions of the electromagnetic spectrum that ancient texts describe using terminology that suggest awareness of optimal transmission frequencies. The waterhole region between hydrogen and hydroxyl emission lines that SETI researchers identified as promising for interstellar communication corresponds to frequency ranges that ancient texts associate with effective signal propagation. While ancient terminology differs from modern scientific language, the conceptual correspondence regarding optimal frequency selection suggests shared understanding of physical principles governing electromagnetic communication. Modern satellite communication systems have independently discovered orbital positions and geometric arrangements that ancient astronomical texts specify as favorable for signal transmission. Geostationary orbital positions that provide continuous coverage of terrestrial locations correspond to celestial coordinates that ancient texts identify as stations of the watchers, fixed positions in the sky from which continuous observation of Earth becomes possible. The mathematical relationships governing optimal satellite positioning for global communication coverage match astronomical parameters that appear in ancient texts describing coordination between terrestrial and celestial communication points. The development of phased array antenna systems and synthetic aperture techniques in modern telecommunications has recreated technological approaches that ancient temple architecture appears to have implemented through acoustic and architectural means. Modern phased arrays combine signals from multiple antenna elements to create directional transmission or reception patterns, achieving effective apertures larger than individual elements. The geometric arrangements of ziggurat levels and the positioning of multiple communication sites within coordinated networks suggest ancient implementation of similar principles using architectural elements and site distribution to achieve directional communication capabilities. The precision timing requirements for modern communication systems have necessitated development of atomic clocks and GPS satellite networks that provide microsecond synchronization accuracy. Ancient communication protocols required comparable timing precision for coordinating multi-site transmissions and identifying optimal astronomical windows. While ancient civilizations lacked atomic clocks, the astronomical timing methods they developed achieved practical synchronization adequate for their communication requirements. The modern recognition that precise timing constitutes essential infrastructure for advanced communication systems validates ancient emphasis on astronomical observation and calendar calculation as foundational technologies. The emergence of quantum communication technologies and experiments with quantum entanglement for information transmission represent the cutting edge of modern communication research. Yet these developments may reconnect with ancient understanding of consciousness-based communication modalities. Ancient texts emphasize that effective communication required not only technological equipment, but also specific mental states and consciousness techniques that operators must master. Modern quantum physics reveals that consciousness and observation play fundamental roles in physical phenomena, suggesting possible scientific frameworks for understanding ancient claims about consciousness, involvement in communication processes. The convergence between ancient consciousness-based communication concepts and modern quantum information theory suggests that complete understanding of communication possibilities may require integration of technological and consciousness-based approaches that ancient practitioners apparently achieved, but that modern science is only beginning to explore. The accumulated evidence from archaeological discoveries, electromagnetic anomalies, experimental recreations, modern signal detections and technological convergences collectively suggest that ancient Mesopotamian communication systems represented genuine sophisticated technologies rather than purely mythological or religious constructs. The consistency of evidence across multiple independent domains, textual documentation, physical artifacts, measurable electromagnetic phenomena, and correspondence with modern scientific principles, argues for serious reconsideration of ancient technological capabilities. Whether the Anunnaki were extraterrestrial visitors, representatives of advanced terrestrial civilizations, or beings whose nature transcends conventional categories, the evidence indicates they established communication infrastructure that functioned according to principles that modern science is rediscovering, and that may continue to operate at some level into the present day. The possibility that humanity might reconnect with these ancient communication systems and re-establish contact with whatever intelligence originally established them represents one of the most profound questions facing contemporary civilization as we develop technologies that approach, and in some cases replicate, the capabilities that our ancestors apparently possessed thousands of years ago. The convergence of archaeological evidence, ancient textual documentation, electromagnetic measurements, and modern technological parallels presents a compelling case that fundamentally challenges conventional understanding of ancient Mesopotamian civilization and human technological history. The communication systems that the Sumerians and their successors maintained after the Anunnaki departure were not primitive religious rituals cloaked in mythological language, but sophisticated technological installations operating according to principles that modern science is only now beginning to fully comprehend. The crystalline devices discovered in sealed temple chambers, the acoustic resonance properties of ziggurat architecture, the mathematical precision of astronomical timing calculations, and the coordinated multi-site network operations all point to capabilities that exceeded what conventional chronology attributes to Bronze Age civilizations by margins that demand explanation. The systematic preservation of this knowledge through mystery schools, hereditary priesthoods, and encrypted textual traditions demonstrates that ancient civilizations understood the fragility of technological knowledge and developed sophisticated strategies for ensuring its survival across periods of political disruption and cultural transformation. The transmission of communication protocols from Mesopotamia to Egypt, Greece, India, and eventually to Islamic and European civilizations created distributed preservation networks that maintained essential information even as individual centres of learning declined or disappeared. This long-term preservation strategy reflects understanding of cyclical patterns in civilizational development, the recognition that advanced knowledge might be temporarily lost but could be recovered by future generations if properly preserved. The correlation between ancient return prophecies and contemporary technological developments, astronomical observations, and unexplained phenomena suggests we may be approaching one of the predicted transition periods when renewed contact becomes possible. The fact that modern communication technologies independently rediscover principles that ancient systems employed, from optimal frequency selection to multi-site coordination to the importance of precise astronomical timing, indicates that humanity has regained technological capabilities approaching those that enabled the original Anunnaki human communication. Whether the Anunnaki represent extraterrestrial intelligences, advanced terrestrial precursor civilizations, or beings whose nature transcends conventional categories, the evidence indicates they established infrastructure designed to maintain contact across vast spans of time and space. For contemporary humanity, the implications extend far beyond academic debates about ancient history. If the communication systems that ancient texts describe were functional technologies, and if modern electromagnetic anomalies and signal detections represent continued operation or reactivation of these systems, then we face the extraordinary possibility that contact with non-human intelligence may occur not through our modern SETI programs scanning distant stars, but through reconnection with communication networks established on Earth thousands of years ago. The ancient protocols preserved in cuneiform tablets, the underground facilities that continue to generate measurable electromagnetic effects, and the astronomical timing calculations that identified this era as a potential return window all suggest that our ancestors left us not merely historical records, but operational infrastructure for re-establishing contact with the intelligences they knew as gods. The question facing us is whether we possess the wisdom to use this inherited technology responsibly, or whether we will repeat whatever failures led to the original departure and the long silence that followed.